Hi there, welcome back to the channel. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The ballroom at Fort Arlington was dressed like a five-star wedding venue. Crystal chandeliers, polished brass railings, a string quartet in dress blues, playing something patriotic but soft enough not to interrupt the clinking of expensive glasses. The Army knows how to throw a party when it wants to congratulate itself. I stood near the back wall in a simple navy dress, no medals, no insignia, nothing that said who I was. That was the point. Officially, I wasn't supposed to be there. Unofficially, I had every right. Across the room, under a spotlight that looked like it had been waiting her whole life for this moment, stood my younger sister, Brianna Miller. Perfect hair, tailored red gown, a smile calibrated for maximum sympathy. She held a plaque that read, "Outstanding Civilian Support to the Corps." People lined up to shake her hand. "Brianna, we couldn't have done it without you. Your logistical coordination during last year's emergency response was extraordinary. You're the backbone behind our brave men and women." She placed one hand gently over her chest each time someone praised her, as if absorbing the applause straight into her bloodstream. I watched in silence. My father, George Miller, stood next to her in a tuxedo that still didn't hide the fact he was a retired contractor who suddenly liked reminding people his father had been a decorated veteran. My mother, Evelyn, nodded at every compliment like she personally trained the entire U.S. military. Then Brianna's eyes found me. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. She leaned toward a group of officers and their spouses, then lifted her chin slightly in my direction. "Just don't let my sister's sad little act fool you," she said loud enough for the people around her to hear. "She's the only one in her unit who got expelled, couldn't handle the pressure, walked away when things got dangerous." The room didn't go silent. It shifted. Conversations slowed, heads turned. You can always feel when a room decides you're the story. One of the colonels raised an eyebrow. Expelled, Brianna nodded her expression carefully, balanced between regret and embarrassment. They don't advertise those things, of course. But yeah, she abandoned her team. It was humiliating for the family. My mother sighed dramatically. "We tried to help her. Therapy, support, everything. But some people just aren't built for service." My father cleared his throat and looked directly at me. "Cassidy, this isn't really the right place for you. Tonight is about heroes." Heroes. I felt the word land and stay there. I didn't argue. I didn't rush forward. I didn't raise my voice. I just stayed where I was and let them talk. Brianna stepped closer to the edge of the stage area, holding her plaque like it weighed nothing. "We all have our roles," she continued, smiling at the crowd. "Some of us support courage. Some of us fold under it." A few people laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because they didn't want to look uncomfortable. That's how public humiliation works. It relies on social survival. I could have corrected her right there. I could have said the word classified and watched their faces freeze. I could have mentioned that discharge paperwork doesn't come with silence clauses unless there's a reason. Instead, I looked at her and gave her a small nod. She mistook it for shame. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Let's give another round of applause to Miss Brianna Miller for her unwavering commitment to our troops." The applause came fast and obedient. I know the failure, while the real truth stayed buried. Because it was inconvenient for everyone else, I walked out of that ballroom without looking back and drove straight to my parents' house because I knew they wouldn't let it go. The Miller house hasn't changed in 20 years. Same white siding, same flag out front, same framed photo of my grandfather in uniform hanging in the hallway like a silent judge. By the time I stepped inside, Brianna was already there. Of course she was. She moves fast when there's something to secure. My father was sitting at the dining table with a folder in front of him. Not a casual folder, the kind people use when they're about to make something official. My mother stood near the kitchen island, arms crossed like she was bracing for impact, but also ready to enjoy it. "You shouldn't have shown up tonight," my father said before I even took my coat off. "I was invited," I replied calmly. "Not by family," my mother snapped. Brianna leaned back in her chair, still in that red dress, still glowing from applause. "We need to settle this now. Settle what I asked." My father slid the folder toward me but kept his hand on it. The land, that got my attention. The land was my grandfather's. 40 acres just outside town. He bought it after he came back from Vietnam. Said he needed space where no one could order him around anymore. He left it in a trust to be divided between his grandchildren. Between us. "I'm revising the beneficiary structure," my father said. Your name will be removed. I looked at him steadily. On what grounds? He inhaled sharply. On the grounds that you dishonored this family and this country. There it was, the verdict. Brianna reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. She placed them carefully on the table like evidence in a courtroom drama. I didn't want to do this, she said, which meant she absolutely did. But Dad deserved the truth. I didn't touch the papers. What truth? I asked. She tapped the top page. Internal communication from someone still active. You were removed from your unit following a classified mission. Brianna leaned forward. You don't get to hide behind classified every time you're cornered. I'm not hiding, I said. I'm complying. With what? She challenged. The law. That irritated her. My father opened the folder fully now. Inside were printed amendments to the trust, a handwritten note from his attorney, a draft ready for signature. I've already spoken to legal counsel, he said. Given the circumstances, reallocating your share to Brianna protects the property from reputational damage. Reputational damage, I asked. If it ever became public that one beneficiary deserted her post, it could complicate things. Complicate what? Selling hay. This isn't a joke, my mother snapped. I looked at the framed photo of my grandfather on the wall, uniform pressed, eyes steady. He hated excuses. He hated lies more. You're giving everything to her, I said. Yes, my father replied firmly. She's proven her commitment to service. I almost smiled at that. Brianna folded her hands together. You made your choices. We're just responding to them. And if you're wrong, I asked. We're not, she said quickly. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the small USB drive resting there. Cold, light, quiet. Haven't you ever wondered, I asked my father, why there's no public record of my discharge? He hesitated. Or why no one from my unit has spoken about it. They're protecting themselves, Brianna answered before he could. From what? I asked. From being associated with you. My father signed the amendment. The scratch of the pen across paper sounded louder than it should have. There, he said. It's done, just like that. Decades of family history transferred across a dining table because my sister handed them a convincing lie. I didn't yell, I didn't flip the table, I didn't beg. I picked up the forged report and studied it one more time. You went through a lot of effort, I said to Brianna. Truth requires documentation, she replied. No, I corrected her calmly. Lies require paperwork. My mother stepped between us. You need help. That's what this is, trauma. You can't accept what happened. I accept exactly what happened, I said. My father stood. Then accept the consequences. I placed the papers back down neatly. Okay, I said. That caught them off guard. Okay, Brianna repeated. You want the land? Take it. My father blinked. You're not going to fight this, not tonight. Brianna's eyes narrowed. You don't care. I looked directly at her. Oh, I care. I just wasn't going to fight a courtroom battle inside a dining room. There's a difference between reacting and temporary glitch, I said. Give me a minute. I stepped outside and sat in my car. A guardianship petition requires medical documentation, a court filing, a hearing notice. I never received one, which meant one of two things. Either I had been deliberately excluded through false emergency claims, or someone manipulated the system well enough to bypass proper service requirements. I already knew the answer. I drove straight to the county clerk's office. The file was there. Petitioner Brianna Miller. Claim subject exhibits signs of combat-induced dissociation and impaired judgment. Supporting evidence. Recent public instability, documented discharge under disciplinary action, and a statement from a private therapist I had never met. The signature at the bottom of the consent form looked like mine. It wasn't. It was close. Practiced. Clean. Brianna doesn't do messy crimes. I stood there reading the filing twice. She didn't just want the land. She wanted control. The monthly disability compensation I received wasn't glamorous. It covered therapy, and I'm proactive. She hung up. I stared at the steering wheel for a long second. She'd escalated. This wasn't social humiliation anymore. This was financial sabotage with legal paperwork attached. I drove back to the pharmacy. Tom was still there pretending to read a poster about flu shots. Card issue, I said. It's handled. I paid in cash. On the way out, he stopped me. You sure you're good? Define good, I replied. He gave me a look. The kind soldiers give when they know something's wrong but won't push. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know, but that wasn't the point. I dropped him off at his apartment and drove home. My mailbox had a certified letter waiting, temporary financial conservatorship order. Effective immediately. She moved fast. I went inside, sat at my kitchen table, and laid everything out. The forged report about my desertion, the trust amendment removing me from the land, the guardianship petition claiming I was mentally incompetent. 3 moves in under 48 hours. That's not panic, that's a plan. I pulled out my laptop and accessed my secure external drive. The folder labeled Ghost File stared back at me. Inside were mission briefings that never made headlines. After-action reports with redactions so heavy they looked like blackout poetry. Communications logs that proved chain of command. Drag the army into explaining why a mission involving 19 soldiers was buried. That wasn't a small lever. I leaned back and considered my options. She wanted to paint me unstable. Fine. Then I would be controlled, precise, measured, unemotional in public. Because nothing irritates a manipulator more than losing the ability to provoke. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered. My father sighed heavily. Cassidy, just fix this. Withdraw whatever influence you have over these men. I looked at him. You think I control them? Obviously, Brianna said. No, I replied evenly. They follow facts. She scoffed again. You mean delusions. I stepped back toward my car. You might want to stop calling the police every time you see a veteran you don't recognize, I said calmly. It's not a good look. For who, she demanded. For someone claiming to champion the military. That hit. She didn't respond. I got back into my car and drove off. Half a mile down the road, my phone buzzed. Scar. They called the cops, he said flatly. I know. Do you want us visible or invisible? I thought about that. Brianna thrives in public narratives. She likes the stage. Visible, I said, but disciplined. There was a pause. Understood. I ended the call and checked my rearview mirror. The ghosts were no longer waiting in silence. They were moving into position. I printed the first set of coordinates at 2:14 a.m. No return address, no message. Just latitude and longitude timestamp and elevation. Anyone who had been on Ember Ridge would recognize it instantly. Anyone who hadn't would think it was random. I sealed the paper in a plain white envelope and addressed it to Brianna Miller's office at the Veterans Support Foundation downtown. She likes titles. Executive Director sounds impressive when you don't ask too many questions about funding streams. The envelope arrived the next morning. I know because she called me at 9:37 a.m. You're sick, she said without greeting. Good morning, I replied. You think this is funny? I don't know what you're talking about. The coordinates, she snapped. The mountain pass, the date. I stayed quiet. She exhaled sharply. You're trying to intimidate me. With numbers, I asked. You're obsessed. I'm organized. She hung up. By noon, she'd contacted 2 mutual acquaintances from the banquet asking if anyone else had received weird military references. No one had. That was the point. Day 2, I sent another envelope. Different coordinates, different timestamp. This one marked the extraction point. No note. By the 3rd envelope, she stopped calling me and started making mistakes. I checked public filings for her foundation, financial disclosures, donor reports, grant allocations. There were inconsistencies, small transfers to shell consulting firms, administrative fees that didn't match program output, emergency logistical support reimbursements tied to events that never happened. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was siphoning from donors under the banner of military advocacy. That's a dangerous game. I didn't report it, not yet. Instead, I sent envelope number 4. This one included a satellite image, black and white, high resolution. It showed the burned-out vehicles at the base of the ridge. No commentary. That afternoon, she called my parents in a panic. I know because my mother called me screaming. Stop harassing your sister. Has she shown you what she's receiving? I asked calmly. It triggers review, he said. Full review. Operational, yes. Public, potentially. That's what I expected. And the 19, I asked. They signed lifetime non-disclosure agreements, he replied. But those agreements don't apply if the mission is officially acknowledged, which meant this wasn't just about me. It was about reopening a classified operation. You're asking for clearance, he said calmly. I'm asking for protection, I corrected. For yourself, for the truth. He was quiet for a few seconds. Cassidy, he said finally, if this goes public, it won't be clean. There will be questions. About decisions, celebrating the core anniversary, brass polished to mirror shine. This is a public ceremony, I said. Yes, ma'am. Then I'm attending. You're permitted in the civilian section, he said carefully, behind the secondary barrier. Secondary barrier, that's a polite term for keep her contained. I took my ID back. Understood. He seemed relieved that I wasn't arguing. That's the thing about composure. It confuses people who are expecting chaos. As I walked toward the main seating area, I saw her, front row, cream suit this time, hair pulled back tight, sitting between two generals like she belonged there. She spotted me immediately. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a waist-high metal barrier dividing the general audience from the reserved seating. I stopped behind it. A young corporal standing nearby glanced at me. "Ma'am, this section is reserved." "I'm aware," I replied. He shifted awkwardly. "You'll need to stay behind the line. Behind the line." That phrase landed harder than it should have. I stayed where I was. From this angle, I could see Brianna lean slightly toward one of the generals and whisper something. He glanced back at me briefly, then returned his attention to the program. She looked back at me and mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I could read lips. Coward. A few minutes later, during a break in the opening remarks, she stood and walked toward the barrier. She didn't have to. She chose to. "You made it past the gate," she said lightly. "They let civilians in," I replied. She glanced at the corporal. "I'm surprised they didn't check her mental health clearance." The corporal stiffened. "I'm fine," I said calmly. "Thank you for your concern." She tilted her head. "You know this is where you belong." "Behind a fence?" I asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Where people who run from duty stand." A couple of nearby guests shifted uncomfortably. No one interrupted. Two more familiar faces were scattered through the crowd, spread out, observing, visible but controlled. Exactly as instructed. Brianna laughed at something one of the generals said. She leaned in comfortably, fully at ease. At one point she glanced back again and called out just loud enough for the people near her to hear. "Stay where you are, Cassidy. That's your place." A woman in pearls turned and looked at me with open curiosity. I met her gaze calmly. "My place," I repeated. "Yes," Brianna continued. "Behind the fence, where the ones who couldn't handle it belong." I didn't respond immediately, because anger is what she wanted, and I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I rested my hands lightly on the top of the metal barrier and watched the stage. The Master of Ceremonies announced the upcoming keynote address, General Vance Thorne. Brianna's posture shifted slightly. She hadn't expected that. Interesting. As the general stepped onto the stage, the entire audience stood, including me. He began with standard remarks. Gratitude, history, tradition, then his tone changed. "There are stories," he said calmly into the microphone, "that don't always make headlines." Brianna's smile faded just a fraction. "Operations," he continued, "that remain classified longer than the public understands." I stayed still, from behind the barrier, exactly where she thought I belonged. He scanned the crowd once before continuing, and sometimes he said evenly, "The difference between survival and catastrophe comes down to one officer's refusal to wait." The air shifted. Brianna's jaw tightened. She glanced at me again. I didn't move, not yet, because sometimes the strongest position isn't front row. It's the one they tried to confine you to right before the line disappears. I pushed off the metal barrier and stepped into the aisle before I gave myself time to reconsider. No rush, no dramatic gestures, just a steady walk down the center path between folding chairs filled with pressed uniforms and polished shoes. On stage, Brianna adjusted the microphone. General Thorne had finished his remarks without naming names. Deliberate, controlled. He stepped aside as the Master of Ceremonies announced the next speaker, Ms. Brianna Miller, in recognition of her extraordinary civilian leadership and support. Applause rolled forward. She rose smoothly, smiled at the generals beside her, and walked onto the stage like she'd rehearsed this her whole life, because she probably had. I kept walking. From the back rows, people began to notice. A murmur moved through the crowd, not loud, just curious. Brianna gripped the podium. Today, she began confidently, "We celebrate courage. Not just on the battlefield, but behind the scenes." Her voice carried easily across the field. "Some of us don't wear the uniform." She continued, placing a hand over her chest again. "But we stand just as firmly in support of those who do." I stopped halfway down the aisle, close enough to be seen, far enough not to interrupt. She didn't look at me yet. During a critical overseas mission several years ago, she went on, I worked closely with logistical teams to ensure supplies and extraction coordination were handled without delay. That was new. There had been no civilian logistical support embedded in Ember Ridge. None. She was rewriting history in front of people who didn't know the difference. I was told afterward, she said, voice tightening slightly for dramatic effect, that the support structure we provided helped save an entire squad. An entire squad. 19 men. My jaw tightened, but I kept walking. She lifted something from behind the podium. A medal. It wasn't regulation issue. The ribbon color was slightly off. The engraving looked polished but unofficial. Still from a distance it passed. This, she said, holding it up, was given to me privately in gratitude. Privately, of course. The murmurs grew louder. I reached the front row. She finally saw me clearly. Her composure flickered for half a second. Then it snapped back into place. And while not every story ends in honor, she continued pointedly, those who remain steady deserve recognition. I stepped into the open space near the stage stairs. No shouting, no interruption, just presence. One of the event coordinators moved toward me nervously. Ma'am, this area is restricted. I'm aware, I said calmly. Brianna's voice sharpened. Some people, she said into the microphone, now eyes locked on me, cannot accept their own failures and attempt to disrupt others' success. That got attention. All eyes turned fully toward me. I didn't stop walking. The metal steps to the stage were 3 feet away. Brianna's face hardened. Security, she snapped, suddenly dropping the performance tone. Remove the deserter. The word hit the crowd like a spark. 2 military police officers stationed near the perimeter started moving. I didn't accelerate. I didn't resist. I reached the bottom of the steps and stopped. General Thorne hadn't moved from his position off to the side of the stage. He was watching. Brianna leaned over the podium. You abandoned your unit, she said loudly. No microphone filter. You don't get to stand here. I met her eyes evenly. I didn't abandon anyone, I replied, voice steady, but firm enough to carry. The crowd shifted again. One of the MPs reached my side. Ma'am, he said quietly, we've been instructed to escort you out if you attempt to access the stage. Instructed by who, I asked. He hesitated. Event coordination, he replied. I glanced at Brianna. She held the fake metal higher like a shield. You see, she said into the microphone again, regaining her rhythm. This is instability. This is why difficult decisions have to be made. You forged that metal, I said calmly. Gasps rippled through the front rows. She laughed sharply. You're delusional. Who signed it? I asked. It was a private acknowledgement. From which commanding officer? I continued. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her voice. Security removed this individual immediately. The MPS shifted closer. I didn't resist. I didn't look angry. I looked at General Thorne. He finally stepped forward. Hold, he said quietly. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The MPs froze mid-step. Brianna turned toward him quickly. Sir, she's disrupting. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. Colonel, he said. Evenly. The word carried further than any shout. The crowd fell into sudden silence. Brianna's expression drained of color. I believe he continued calmly. You were about to correct the record. I didn't move immediately. I didn't step up the stairs yet. I just stood there, letting the weight of that single word settle over the audience. Colonel, not deserter, not unstable, not failure. Brianna's grip on the podium tightened. That's not official, she said quickly. Her record is classified. General Thorne replied without turning toward her. And incomplete in public archives. The fake medal in her hand suddenly looked small. I stepped onto the first stair. No one stopped me. No one dared. Brianna backed slightly away from the podium. You can't just, she started. I can, the general said calmly. I reached the stage level and stopped a few feet from her, close enough to see the fine tremor in her fingers. You claimed logistical involvement in an operation, I said evenly. Name the grid reference. She stared at me. Silence. Name the terrain, I continued. Her lips parted slightly. You can't, I said. She tried to recover. This is harassment. No, I replied. This is clarification. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were listening, closely. And for the first time since this started, Brianna wasn't controlling the room. I stood on that stage with Brianna frozen beside the podium and the entire base holding its breath. For a second, no one moved. Then the steel service door at the side of the grandstand swung open, not dramatically, not theatrically, just firmly. Military police entered first. Controlled formation, not aggressive, just official. Behind them walked General Vance Thorne. He didn't glance at Brianna. He didn't acknowledge the fake medal in her hand. He walked straight toward me. Every step was deliberate. When he stopped in front of me, he came to full attention. Then he rendered a textbook salute, sharp, precise, unmistakable. "Colonel Miller, ma'am," he said clearly, voice carrying across the field. "The 19 men you dragged through the fire are waiting for you." The silence that followed felt heavier than any applause. Behind him, along the edge of the stage, 19 men stepped into view. Not in dress blues, not in ceremonial display. Operational uniforms, service patches, real ribbons. Scar was there. So were the others I'd spotted in the crowd. They lined up in formation. No theatrics, just presence. Brianna's breathing became audible in the microphone she still clutched. This isn't," she started. General Thorne turned slightly toward the audience. 5 years ago, he said evenly. Operation Ember Ridge encountered catastrophic delay in extraction authorization. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. Under active fire then. Major Cassidy Miller advanced without waiting for delayed clearance. He looked at me briefly. Against recommendation, not disobedience, not desertion. Recommendation. She secured a disabled convoy, established manual evacuation routes, and personally returned under sustained fire to retrieve remaining personnel. He paused. 19. Then he began reading. One by one, full names, rank, unit. Each name echoed across the base speakers. Sergeant Daniel Ruiz, Staff Sergeant Marcus Hale, Specialist Aaron Whitaker, Corporal Liam Donnelly, Private First Class Jordan Brooks. He didn't rush. He didn't embellish. Each man stepped forward half a pace when his name was called. 19 half steps. 19 confirmations. I didn't move. I didn't look at Brianna. I kept my posture steady. By the 10th name, the audience wasn't just silent. They were recalibrating, because this wasn't rumor. This was official acknowledgement. When the 19th name was spoken, General Thorne closed the folder in his hand. These men survived because Colonel Miller refused to leave them. He let that sit. Official commendation documentation was sealed pending strategic review of operational delay. Strategic review, that's polite language for someone higher up, hesitated. He continued, no record of desertion exists. No disciplinary removal occurred. Any document suggesting otherwise is fabricated. Fabricated. The word landed cleanly. Brianna took a step back. Her microphone slipped slightly in her grip. That's not, she tried again. General Thorne finally turned toward her. Mrs. Miller, he said evenly. You submitted a falsified internal report to multiple civilian entities and attempted to influence base security protocols using unverified psychological claims. Her face strained completely now. I was protecting, she began. You were exploiting, he corrected. The military police shifted positions subtly, not grabbing her, not yet. The general faced the audience again. Integrity matters, he said calmly, especially when invoked publicly. Then he looked back at me. Colonel Miller, he said, still at attention on behalf of the United States Army. Your service is acknowledged. He lowered his salute. I returned it. Nothing dramatic, just correct. The 19 men behind him came to attention as well. Scar's eyes met mine briefly. No smiles, no celebration, just confirmation. Brianna looked around as if searching for someone to validate her version of events. The generals she'd been sitting beside avoided eye contact. The audience wasn't whispering anymore. They were watching her. Not me, her. She tried one last time. This is a misunderstanding, she said weakly. I was told by who? General Thorne asked calmly. She didn't answer. Because there wasn't anyone. She built the story herself. The fake metal slipped from her hand and hit the stage floor with a dull metallic sound. It didn't bounce, it didn't shatter, it just lay there, unimpressive. General Thorne nodded slightly to the MPs. They stepped forward. Ms. Miller, one of them said evenly. We need you to come with us. For what, she demanded, voice cracking now. Preliminary investigation into fraudulent documentation, impersonation of military authority, and attempted financial exploitation connected to falsified records. The crowd absorbed that in silence. She looked at me, not angry anymore, not confident, just stunned. You did this, she whispered. No, I said calmly. You did. The MPs guided her toward the side exit. No cuffs yet, just control. As she passed the line of 19 men, none of them looked at her. That was deliberate. When she disappeared through the steel door, the air seemed to reset. General Thorne addressed the audience once more. "Let this serve as a reminder," he said evenly, "that honor is not decorative. It is earned under pressure." Then he stepped aside. He didn't introduce me. He didn't prompt applause. He didn't need to. Because the truth doesn't require background music. I stepped forward to the microphone, not to give a speech, just to correct one final detail. "I didn't drag anyone through fire," I said calmly. "We moved together." Then I stepped back. No dramatic exit. No victory pose. Just 19 men standing where they were always meant to stand. Visible. I stepped down from the stage without waiting for applause because that wasn't why I was there. Behind me, General Thorne was already speaking quietly with the investigative officers. The fake medal was sealed in an evidence bag. The forged internal report that Brianna had circulated was projected onto a side screen for verification. Formatting errors were highlighted in red. Missing authentication codes. Fabricated clearance stamps. Clean work if you didn't know what to look for. The 19 men dispersed in controlled fashion, but they didn't leave. They stayed within visible range, not for intimidation, for solidarity. Across the field, I saw my parents standing near the reserved section. They looked smaller than they had earlier. My father's posture wasn't firm anymore. My mother's confident expression was gone. When I approached, they didn't wait for me to speak. My father stepped forward first. "Cassidy," he said, voice unsteady. "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," I replied. My mother's eyes were red. She showed us documents. "Did you verify them?" I asked calmly. Silence. "We trusted her," my father said weakly. "You trusted what was convenient," I corrected. Behind us, 2 military police officers escorted Brianna back into view briefly. Not for ceremony, for processing. Her civilian liaison credentials were removed on site. Her foundation access was suspended pending federal audit. The investigation into financial fraud was already underway. Because when you falsify military documentation and use it to obtain financial or reputational gain, it stops being family drama. It becomes federal. My mother's voice cracked. "We were trying to protect this family." From what I asked evenly. My father swallowed. "From scandal. You created one." He looked down. My mother did something I didn't expect. She dropped to her knees, right there on the parade ground. "Please," she said. "We were wrong." My father followed. I didn't rush to lift them. I didn't dramatize it. I just stood there. "You removed me from Granddad's land," I said calmly. "You signed legal amendments based on forged evidence. We'll reverse it," my father said quickly, immediately. "You filed no contact advisories with base security," I continued. "You supported a false guardianship petition claiming I was mentally unstable. We believed my mother started. You believed the version that required the least effort from you," I said. That landed, because it was accurate. Brianna was placed into a transport vehicle a few yards away. No public display, no shouting, just procedure. She looked at me once before the door closed. Not with hatred, with disbelief, because she truly thought she could manage the narrative forever. My father reached toward me. "Cassidy, we're your parents." "Yes," I said. "That has to count for something." "It did," I replied. "Until you decided reputation mattered more." He flinched. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my retirement identification card. The one with my rank, my service record, my clearance history. I held it up briefly so they could see it clearly. "I earned this," I said evenly, "with blood, with risk, with decisions you never had to make." My mother was crying openly now. "You don't have to cut us off," she pleaded. I walked past them toward a nearby folding table where event materials were stacked. I placed the card down on the surface in front of them. "This rank cost me something," I said calmly, "but this family cost me more." My father shook his head. "We can fix this." "You can fix paperwork," I replied. "You can't fix trust once you trade it." I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just stated it plainly. "Blood doesn't excuse betrayal," I continued. "It makes it worse." The wind picked up slightly across the field. Not dramatic, just movement. Behind me I heard boots approach. Scar stopped beside me first. "We're heading out," he said quietly. I nodded. I looked back at my parents one last time. "I won't fight you for the land," I said. "Keep it, sell it, donate it, I don't care." "But it's yours," my mother whispered. "It was Granddad's," I corrected. He understood sacrifice. You didn't. That ended it. I turned away. No hesitation. The 19 fell into step around me naturally, not in formation, just together. As we walked across the base toward the parking area, no one stopped us. No one questioned us. Not because of authority, because clarity doesn't require defense. Scar walked beside me. You good? He asked. Yes, I said. You sure? Yes. There's a difference between relief and peace. Relief is when pressure disappears. Peace is when you no longer need anyone else to validate what you know. I had both. Behind us, the ceremony continued in reduced tone, speeches adjusted, narratives corrected. But that wasn't my concern anymore. One of the younger soldiers spoke up. Ma'am, if this goes public, it will, I said calmly. And you're okay with that, yes. Because the truth wasn't about praise. It was about record. We reached the edge of the lot where civilian vehicles were parked. The sky was shifting toward evening. No symbolism, just time passing like it always does. Scar stopped and looked at me. They called you Phoenix, he said. They still do, another soldier added quietly. I shook my head slightly. They can call me Cassidy, I said. Titles matter in operations, not here. Before getting into my car, I turned back toward them. You didn't owe me this, I said. Scar gave a small shrug. You didn't leave us. That was enough. As they dispersed toward their vehicles, I stood for a second alone, not abandoned, alone by choice. I didn't look back at the parade ground again. Some things don't need revisiting once they've been set straight. I got into my car and started the engine. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven them because they're family? Or would you have walked away like I did? Tell me what you would have chosen, and if you believe justice is stronger when it's public or when it's quiet. And if you want more stories about standing your ground when the room turns against you, subscribe and stay with me. After everything settled and the noise faded, I kept thinking about one thing. Not the salute, not the arrests, not even the fake medal. I kept thinking about how easily people believed her. That's the part that sticks. Because the truth didn't change. The facts didn't change. The mission didn't change. But the room chose the version that sounded cleaner. And that's something most of us don't talk about enough. The lie usually sounds better than the truth. The lie is simple. She panicked. She ran. She couldn't handle it. That's easy to digest, easy to repeat, easy to explain at dinner parties. The truth. The truth is messy. The truth involves delayed orders, incomplete briefings, radio silence, bad terrain, and decisions made in seconds that get judged for years. Most people don't want messy. They want a headline. And if you've ever been in a situation where someone reduced your worst day to a single accusation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Here's the first lesson I learned. If someone wants to believe the worst about you, they will not require much evidence. If someone wants to believe the best about you, they will require proof. That imbalance isn't personal, it's human. My parents didn't investigate because the version Brianna gave them protected their image. It required no uncomfortable conversations. No deep digging, no legal risk. It let them say, we did our best without doing any work. That's not cruelty, that's convenience. And convenience is powerful. So what do you do when the convenient lie spreads faster than the complicated truth? You don't argue emotionally, you document, you don't shout, you prepare. There's a reason I didn't fight her in the ballroom, or in the dining room, or behind the metal barrier, because reacting on the wrong stage just makes you look unstable. If you're dealing with a smear campaign at work, in your family, in your community, understand this, the first instinct will be to defend yourself immediately. Resist that. Ask yourself 3 questions instead. Is this the right audience? Is this the right moment? Do I have the right evidence? If the answer to any of those is no, you wait. That's not weakness, that's discipline. Another hard truth, family does not automatically mean safe. Blood does not make someone immune to ego, envy, or ambition. And sometimes the person who knows you best also knows exactly how to frame you in the worst possible way. That doesn't mean you become paranoid. It means you become clear-eyed. Trust is not blind, it's verified. If someone brings you paperwork, read it. If someone tells you a story, ask for specifics, dates, names, documentation. You'd be surprised how many lies fall apart under calm questions. Brianna didn't collapse because I screamed louder. She collapsed because she couldn't name a grid reference. Precision defeats performance. There's another uncomfortable lesson here. Public humiliation feels unbearable in the moment, but public correction is stronger. There's a difference between being privately vindicated and being publicly restored. Sometimes silence protects you. Sometimes silence protects the lie. You have to know which situation you're in. If someone's attacking you quietly, you don't need a stage. If someone's attacking you publicly, the correction has to match the scale. That doesn't mean revenge. It means proportional response. And here's something else most people won't admit. When you're falsely accused, part of you wants applause after you're cleared. You want the crowd to stand. You want apologies. You want recognition. But if your sense of worth depends on the same crowd that doubted you, you're still giving them power. Peace comes when you don't need their reaction. Recognition is nice. Validation feels good. But stability comes from knowing the truth long before anyone else says it out loud. I didn't need the salute to know what happened on that ridge. I needed the salute to correct the record. There's a difference. So if you're in a situation right now where someone's version of you is spreading faster than your reality, slow down. Ask yourself, are you fighting to be liked or fighting to be accurate? Are you reacting to protect your ego or responding to protect your integrity? Those aren't the same thing, and integrity is quieter. Integrity waits. Integrity gathers receipts. Integrity chooses the battlefield carefully. One more thing. When someone lies about you, it's tempting to destroy them. Expose everything, burn every bridge. That feels powerful, but correction is not the same as cruelty. The goal isn't to crush someone. The goal is to restore truth. After that, what they do with the consequences is on them. You don't need to add extra punishment to feel strong. You need clarity. You need boundaries. You need to stop explaining yourself to people who decided the verdict before hearing the evidence. So let me ask you something honest. Have you ever tried to defend yourself in a room that had already chosen its narrative? And if you have, did you fight emotionally or did you step back and build something stronger? Tell me in the comments, what's harder for you? Staying silent when you're misunderstood or staying calm when you're falsely accused? Because the next time someone rewrites your story, I don't want you louder. I want you prepared. If there's one thing I learned from that entire mess, it's this: power doesn't belong to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the one who keeps records. Brianna thought power meant proximity to generals' polished speeches and dramatic accusations. She believed if she said something confidently enough, people would accept it as fact. And for a while, she was right. Confidence is persuasive, but documentation is undefeated. Let me break this down in practical terms, because this isn't just about military operations or family betrayal. This applies to offices, divorces, business partnerships, sibling disputes, and any situation where someone decides to rewrite reality. When someone attacks you emotionally, your instinct is to respond emotionally. That's the trap. Emotion is reactive. Paper is permanent. When she filed for guardianship, she wasn't yelling. She was filing. She was attaching forged signatures. She was using legal structures to corner me. That's when I realized something important. If someone uses paperwork to control you, you don't counter with anger. You counter with better paperwork. You save emails, you screenshot messages, you log dates and times. You document every interaction. Because once a situation crosses into legal territory, feelings stop mattering. Records start mattering. And here's something most people don't understand until it's too late. Silence without documentation is vulnerability. Staying calm is powerful. Staying calm and unprepared is dangerous. When she called base security and labeled me unstable, I didn't argue at the gate. I didn't cause a scene, but I noted the time. I noted the officer's name. I noted the wording of the flag attached to my ID. Not because I needed to retaliate immediately, because I needed options. Power is options. Another thing people underestimate is emotional discipline. When someone tries to provoke you publicly, they are hoping for one of two outcomes. 1. You explode and confirm their narrative. 2. You retreat and confirm their dominance. There's a third option. You stay steady, you ask precise questions, you force them to provide specifics. Watch what happens when you respond to an accusation with, "Can you clarify the date, who authorized that? Can you provide documentation?" You'll see panic in real time. Because most manipulators operate in generalities. Everyone knows, it's been reported, people are saying. Ask them for one verifiable fact. The room shifts. In corporate environments, this works the same way. If a colleague implies you mishandled something, don't defend yourself with, "I would never." Respond with, "Can you show me the email? Which meeting are you referencing? Who else was present?" Precision creates accountability. I didn't win because I was louder. I won because she couldn't name a grid coordinate. That wasn't luck, that was preparation. Now let's talk about timing. There's a difference between proving someone wrong and choosing the right moment to do it. If I had dumped classified documents on the dining table at my parents' house, what would have happened? They would have panicked. They might have called lawyers. They might have escalated things before the structure was in place. Instead, I waited for a setting where authority was already present. That's strategic positioning. In your life, that might look like waiting until HR is in the room before presenting evidence. It might look like gathering 3 months of financial records before confronting a business partner. It might look like consulting an attorney before responding to a hostile filing. The goal isn't revenge. The goal is containment. When someone lies, they expand chaos. When you respond strategically, you contain it. Another uncomfortable truth. Emotional control is not suppression. It's regulation. There were moments I wanted to yell. Moments I wanted to throw the forged report back in her face. Moments I wanted to tell my parents exactly how small their behavior was. But emotional release in the wrong moment feels good for about 30 seconds. Strategic restraint protects you for years. If you struggle with that, here's something practical. When you feel yourself reacting, pause 3 seconds before responding. Lower your voice instead of raising it. Ask a question instead of making a statement. Those small shifts completely change power dynamics. Calm people are perceived as credible. Reactive people are perceived as unstable. That perception matters more than most people admit. Now let's address something deeper. Why do manipulators rely so heavily on paperwork? Because paperwork feels objective. A document looks official even when it's forged. A stamp creates psychological authority. So if someone weaponizes documentation against you, don't be intimidated by the formatting. Verify it. Look at header alignment. Check for authentication numbers. Confirm issuing departments. Fraud hides in details, and when you expose it calmly, credibility transfers instantly. One more thing I want you to understand. Not every attack requires public exposure. Sometimes a quiet legal correction is enough. Sometimes a direct conversation backed by evidence resolves the issue. But when someone escalates publicly, when they try to redefine you in front of an audience, silence becomes agreement. That's when you match visibility with clarity, not drama, clarity. If you're in a situation right now where someone is manipulating a narrative about you, ask yourself, are you reacting emotionally or are you building leverage? Are you trying to win the argument or are you trying to secure the outcome? Winning arguments feels satisfying. Securing outcomes changes your life. And here's the final lesson from that entire situation. You don't need to destroy someone to regain power. You need structure. You need evidence. You need timing. When the truth finally surfaced, it didn't look dramatic. It looked organized. It looked verified. It looked undeniable. That's real power. So let me ask you something. If someone accused you tomorrow in front of your boss, your family, or your community, would you have receipts or would you have emotions? Because one of those wins in the long run. Tell me in the comments. When conflict hits your life, do you react first or record first? People think the hardest part of a situation like mine is the exposure. It's not. The hardest part is what comes after the truth is out. After the apologies, after the charges, after the public correction. That's when you have to decide whether you're staying or leaving. And leaving doesn't always mean physically moving. Sometimes it means emotionally detaching. Sometimes it means redefining what access people have to you. I didn't walk away from my family because I hated them. I walked away because I understood something clearly for the first time. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can forgive someone and still decide they don't get front row seats in your life anymore. A lot of people struggle with that. They think forgiveness requires reunion, reconciliation, holidays together, smiling for photos. It doesn't. Forgiveness is internal. Reconciliation is conditional. Reconciliation requires accountability, change, and time. And not everyone is willing to do that work. When my parents knelt on that parade ground, it wasn't manipulation. It was shock. It was guilt. It was fear. But guilt isn't repair. Tears aren't restoration. Trust rebuilds slowly, and sometimes it doesn't rebuild at all. Here's something most people won't say out loud. You are allowed to outgrow your family's expectations. You are allowed to choose peace over loyalty. You are allowed to protect yourself from people who share your DNA. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you honest. Another lesson I had to face was this. Not every victory needs to be collected. I could have fought for the land. I could have reclaimed the inheritance. I could have leveraged public sympathy. But sometimes holding on to something keeps you tied to the same cycle. Letting go isn't always loss. Sometimes it's leverage over yourself. If you've ever stayed in a relationship, partnership, or family dynamic longer than you should have, because you didn't want to waste what you invested, you understand this. We overvalue sunk cost. We undervalue future peace. Peace is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's boring. It's stable. And after chaos, boring feels incredible. There's another truth I want you to hear clearly. Walking away without bitterness is not automatic. It's intentional. Bitterness feels justified. It feels powerful. It feels earned. But bitterness keeps you attached to the person who hurt you. It makes them central in your mind. Peace requires detachment. Detachment requires acceptance. Acceptance requires reality. My reality was simple. My sister chose ambition over integrity. My parents chose comfort over investigation. I couldn't change that. What I could change was how much influence they had over my emotional state. So I set boundaries, clear ones, limited contact, legal separation of financial ties, no more explanations, no more defending my name in private rooms. If they wanted a relationship later, it would start from respect, not nostalgia. That's something I encourage you to think about in your own life. Where are you tolerating disrespect because it comes from someone familiar? Where are you staying silent because it's easier than confrontation? Where are you choosing loyalty over self-respect? Self-respect is not arrogance. It's alignment. It's acting in a way that protects your long-term stability, not your short-term comfort. And here's something I've learned about peace. You don't find it by winning. You find it by deciding you don't need to keep fighting. That doesn't mean you stop defending yourself when necessary. It means you stop engaging in unnecessary battles. It means you don't argue with people who have shown you they prefer their narrative over your truth. It means you stop trying to prove your value to someone who already discounted it. I didn't walk away because I was defeated. I walked away because the objective was complete. Truth restored, record corrected, integrity intact. Staying would have been ego. Leaving was clarity. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of something similar, family tension, betrayal, false accusations, ask yourself this. If you were fully vindicated tomorrow, would you actually want to go back to the same dynamic? Or would you realize that the exposure was a doorway out? Sometimes crisis reveals incompatibility. Sometimes betrayal exposes weakness in relationships that were already fragile. And sometimes justice is not about punishment. It's about permission. Permission to move forward without dragging history behind you. I didn't need revenge. I needed resolution. And resolution doesn't always look like reconciliation. So here's what I want you to reflect on. If someone apologized to you today, would you accept it and return to the same pattern? Or would you accept it and redefine the relationship entirely? What matters more to you? Being right in their eyes or being stable in your own? Tell me in the comments when you think about your own life. Are you holding on to something because it's familiar or because it's healthy? And if you've ever chosen peace over proximity, I want to hear what that cost you and what it gave you back. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't standing your ground. It's knowing when to walk away.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.